My name is Eric Skwarczynski, and you're listening to episode number 16 of Gut Reactions. They say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Well, if this is the case, the team behind Friday the 13th should feel immensely flattered, because the amount of imitation that ensued the original 1980 film is almost immeasurable. Pieces, April Fool's Day, The Prowler, Maniac Cop, Happy Birthday to Me, and countless other slashers imitated the formula with varying degrees of success. One of the most successful film series in this run, in my opinion, is the Sleepaway Camp franchise. Today I'll be talking about this wacky series, or at least its best installment, Sleepaway Camp 2. Put your short shorts on, grab your sleeping bag, and be a happy camper. It's time for Gut Reactions. But before we jump into the main discussion, I want to talk about what I've been watching lately. Now, as you probably noticed, there was an episode last week. I can say this isn't because I had a lot of free time, but rather because I was very, very busy and just didn't have time to do one. I've been working on some things, both side projects and just through my normal job, that have kept me from being able to really watch as much as normal and be as active. Even if you've been in the group, you probably noticed I haven't been frequenting it as much. But I have had a little bit of time to watch a few things. So I'll just go ahead and share those really quick, and then I'll get into the main topic at hand. The first film I watched was House of a Thousand Corpses by Rob Zombie.
Howdy, folks. You like blood, violence, freaks of nature? Well, then come on down to Captain Spaulding's Museum of Monsters and Madmen. Yeah, see the alligator boy. Ride my famous murder ride. Most of all, don't forget to take home some of my tasty fried chicken. Ha ha! It just tastes so damn good.
Now, Rob Zombie is by no means a filmmaker for mainstream audiences. He's a very, very polarizing director, and he has a pretty split fan base. Now, as far as my experience with Rob Zombie, I only know him through the Halloween remake, which I'm actually a huge fan of. I know this is blasphemous to say, but I enjoy his Halloween film a lot more than John Carpenter's. I think John Carpenter's is a very masterful movie, but I think maybe because it was my first introduction to Michael Myers, Rob Zombie's remake has just always had a big place in my heart when it comes to the Halloween franchise. So with just that knowledge behind me, I went to House of a Thousand Corpses, his directorial debut for the first time, pretty eager. I was excited to see what he's going to do. I was excited to see the visuals. I know it's got a cult fan base, and it seemed on paper with Bill Moseley in the cast and things of that nature that it would be right up my alley. I can't say it was. I didn't make it through the entire movie. I just felt he wore his influences on his sleeve, but unlike someone like a Tarantino who borrows from a lot of different sources and elevates the material, I felt Rob Zombie never met the greatness of the films that he obviously loves and was inspired by to make the film. Now, obviously, it's his first film, so I still want to try out some of his other filmography, but I wasn't super impressed with this. And there was a little bit of extra bitterness in viewing it when, you're watching Chris Hardwick on the screen and then realize, the next day there's an article released about, everything that happened with him. And it just makes his character feel a little darker and more mean-spirited than I think he was even originally would have been. Now, outside of House of a Thousand Corpses, I also caught 7852, which is a documentary about Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. In particular, the shower scene in Psycho.
Psycho you felt could happen to you. This was the first movie that showed you can be naked, alone in a shower, and someone who is going to come in and just stab you.
It had to be done impressionistically. The head, the feet, a hand.
He has broken the covenant of filmmaker and audience, and the audience cannot wait to see more.
7852 is representative of the 78 shots and 52 cuts that are present inside that shower scene. And it's a really interesting documentary. You have a lot of horror voices. You have Guillermo del Toro, you have Eli Roth, you have Elijah Wood, you have Lee Winnell, Neil Marshall, Jamie Lee Curtis, Danny Elfman. They're all in there just bringing elements of the sequence to the surface. They provide historical context. Some of them bring Hitchcock's cinematic influences to light, with some of the historians there, Elijah Wood and some of his crew sharing their personal reactions. But they're just all celebrating the artistry of what I think is Hitchcock's best film. Now, the actual craft of the doc itself is pretty impressive too. It's incredibly artistic. There's some great black and white reenactments of certain behind-the-scenes moments, and some on-screen moments as well. It's a visually beautiful documentary in a very stark, kind of black and white look. It's beautiful. I definitely recommend it to cinephiles, horror fans, and especially fans of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Moving right along, the other movies I watched were Jurassic Park and Hereditary. Now, I'm not going to go too far into Jurassic Park because I think that's something I want to visit in a future episode. But first, I want to get into Hereditary. Man, Hereditary knocked my socks off. It had such a powerful impact, and I don't really want to speak loosely about it, or I should say unscripted about it, just because it's such an easy film to spoil. So I'm just going to go ahead and read my review, and then once I get done with that, I'm going to jump right into the main topic, which is Sleepaway Camp 2. So here's my review of Hereditary. Attempting to write a review of Hereditary after just one viewing is a pretty intimidating task. It's a film filled with intricate details and powerful emotional moments that no viewer can truly be prepared to encounter. I went into this film having only seen the first theatrical trailer, an expertly edited tease that captures the tone of the film without revealing anything of the primary plot. I too will attempt to review the film without giving away any details that would affect the experience of those viewing it for the first time. During Hereditary, a few things really stood out to me. The first was Toni Collette. The rest of the cast is great as well, but this is her film. I'll be shocked if she's not nominated for Best Actress during the 2018 Oscars. The range she displays with this performance is astounding. Regardless of one's thoughts of the overall film, there's no denying that this is one of the greatest performances in genre history. In addition to Colette's inspired performance, I could not help but notice director Ari Aster's masterful control of tone and pacing. I cannot believe this is his first film. His cinematic influences are apparent, but the film always feels uniquely his. It's interesting to see him approach each scene with both cold, calculated, and observant shots a la Stanley Kubrick, as well as very intimate, personal shots in the vein of Roman Polanski's frenetic shooting style in Rosemary's Baby, or George A. Romero's experimental style found in Season of the Witch. His scares are not ones that pop onto the screen, accompanied by loud bangs or synths like most modern horror films. No. His scares are slow, manipulative, and visceral. It's fascinating that many of the scares are not instantly obvious. The first in particular requires the viewer's eyes to adjust to darkness, slowly revealing the shocking imagery. It sent genuine shivers down my spine, a warning of the onslaught of terrifying imagery that was to come. The movie's not all scares, however. It is also one filled with strong emotional beats that serve as gut punches to the audience. I laughed out loud at times, I jumped, and for one long stretch held back tears as I watched a family grapple with grief and loss in such a realistic and crushing way. The film is immensely uncomfortable to watch, constantly digging deeply into the most sensitive of issues and allowing us to get an intimate, front-row seat to its characters' slow decay in the face of tragedy. The film is truly most powerful in its silent moments, where not a word is uttered. My biggest gripes with the film actually come when too much context, description, or exposition is given. As the film enters its third act, the appreciated restraint the filmmaker showed with dialogue slowly deteriorates. Nothing is left to interpretation. All is explained in dramatic fashion, unraveling what, thus far, had been such a fascinating mystery. However, it's worth noting that this quibble feels minor when held side by side with the rest of this incredible film. Hereditary really does tiptoe on the border of being a masterpiece, only waffling slightly from time to time. One thing is certain. Whatever Ari Aster does next, my butt will be in the theater seat. So there's my review of Hereditary. If you haven't gotten a chance to see it, I definitely recommend that you go check it out. It's absolutely excellent. As you heard in the intro, we're carrying on with our Summer of Fear series by discussing the film Sleepaway Camp 2 particularly, but the Sleepaway Camp series in general. Now, this is a series I hadn't been introduced to until actually this past year. I was trying to watch through a couple of slashers, so I watched April Fool's Day, The Prowler, Maniac Cop, things like that. But Sleepaway Camp was one that had been often brought up, and it just sounded so bizarre. It was on the top of my list to check out. Now, instead of giving a basic review where I go through scene by scene and say, oh, I like this, I didn't like this, I want to be pretty positive and just give you 5 reasons you need to dip your toe into the Sleepaway Camp franchise, particularly the second one. The first thing that I think is the reason you should watch the Sleepaway Camp franchise as a whole is just the kitschy and the often sleazy 70s and 80s aesthetic. Now, I said in the intro, put your short shorts on, and man, that is a very accurate call to action when talking about the Sleepaway Camp movies. The Sleepaway Camp franchise is packed to the brim of strange 80s and 70s era clothing. Just like Friday the 13th is of its time, these movies literally feel like you can see, feel, and just smell the time period they were made in. You have actors in the most ridiculous outfits. You have guys in the shortest of shorts and the tightest of shorts and tank tops that you're pretty worried if they move the wrong direction that their clothes will rip off of them. It is of its time. It is a very unique film. And the movie just feels sleazier than Friday the 13th. It's not so much the nudity factor, because the nudity factor is about equal with both Friday the 13th, and it's just something about just the way they're filmed. It doesn't feel like a movie. It feels like weird filmmaking, very guerrilla filmmaking, and it just has this quality about it that just feels not quite right. It's kind of has almost how Maniac feels, where you just feel like I just need to take a shower the minute I see those opening credits. It just feels so grimy, and like there's so much chest hair and smoke, and it's so interesting. But it's also oddly comforting, like many films of the time. That aesthetic is just really fun to watch, and it's fun to just be transported to a completely different time period where there's nothing PC about this movie. There's nothing polished about this movie. It is an unashamed Friday the 13th knockoff, and it's letting you know every single shot. But everything Friday the 13th does, it tries to do better. So it's fun watching for the aesthetic alone. But also, it has some really genuinely great kills. There's a couple kills in here that are actually, especially in the second one, where I actually was looking away, because even though they are not over the top gory in every single kill, there's some moments like where she's drowning a girl in an outhouse. Just the thought of being drowned in human feces is just really unnerving. But what I love about Sleepaway Camp 2, and what's a very direct rip off Friday the 13th 2 and 3, is as Angela is killing campers, she's taking body parts, and for the most part they're full bodies, and arranging them in her little cabin as like trophies. And so you see everyone, and it's almost humorous. You see people in every state that they've died, all lined up, some with, huge boils because they've been burned, some with, their head missing, some that have been, drowned. It's just a bonkers movie. That's the only way to describe it. It's absolutely bananas. And there's just some genuinely fun kills. Sleepaway Camp 2, and this gets into my third point. So I'll combine part 3 and part 2 here. But Sleepaway Camp is full of blatant homages to Friday the 13th, and it's worth watching just for that as well. There's a couple campers that decide they're going to scare Angela and some of the other campers by dressing up as, they're not named, but they're obviously dressing up as Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees. And with that, you get to see Angela don the knife glove from Nightmare on Elm Street, and you get to see her get a chainsaw a la Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and just take out teens in such a gratuitous knockoff version of these 80s horror classics. It's just fun seeing, kind of at the tail end of the slasher craze, just a movie that's not afraid to have fun with the formula. It's not trying to do what Friday the 13th had tried and failed to do so many times and make it feel serious. It just goes straight into almost Jason X territory, or, Jason Takes Manhattan territory, where it's just not afraid to be really funny and just say, look, this is what we are, and if you are into this type of movie, you're gonna love this, and if you don't, you're probably not. But yeah, it's filled with just some amazing kills and some really great homages to other horror films in the genre. The fourth thing I want to bring up is the music in these movies is awesome. Now, I'm not just talking about that awesome Happy Camper song.
Oh, I'm a happy camper. I love the summer sun. I love the trees and forests. I'm always having fun. Oh, I'm a happy camper. I love the clear blue sky. And with the grace of God, I'll camp until I die.
But just some of the rock tracks they bring out, especially in 2 and 3, are really good. There's some great musical choices in Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3. And again, it's just that rock and roll vibe that you're about to watch a really fun movie. And lastly, but certainly not least, the reason you need to check these movies out is Angela. You had the original Sleepaway Camp that was released back in 1983, starring the horror icon Felissa Rose. And it's a bizarre movie. It's a movie that has such a strange and interesting and complex and weird plot. It just goes full throttle into bonkers territory. It's a really fascinating little movie. Much like the original 1980 Friday the 13th, I enjoy Sleepaway Camp for what it is, but I have to say I much prefer the sequels. Now, in the sequels, Felissa Rose is no longer playing the titular character of Angela, and she's actually replaced by Pamela Springsteen, brother of a small indie musician you may know by the name of Bruce Springsteen. Now, Sleepaway Camp 2 takes place a couple years after the first one ends. Sleepaway Camp 2 was released in 88, so it would be, okay, I'm not good at math, here we go. 8 minus 3 is 5, so it would be 5 years after the original film. Angela is a really weird slasher because she's one of the few to come out in the 80s that is verbal. It's funny because there's a lot of subtext of morality and judgment and wrath and, the force or, the thing or whatever you want to call it. These killers that were all faceless, masked. In this one, we have a killer who's explaining what she's doing. She almost has a Norman Bates-esque, with a lot less nuance, of course, a Norman Bates-esque approach to everything that's going on. She has what she wants to be, and then she has what she is. And so where Friday the 13th had, teens being killed by this faceless killer that represented through different years the AIDS crisis, or you had fear of STDs, or fear of moral judgment based on a strict religious background that a character grew up with, or things like that. In this one, Angela assumes that role and is very vocal about it. Sleepaway Camp 2 opens with her cutting out someone's tongue for saying something inappropriate. She's going after kids that are being voyeuristic and taking nude photos of girls. She's going after couples that are having premarital sex. She's going after people that are doing drugs. She's going after anyone that's upsetting the moral norms. Now, there's a lot of interesting conversation to be had about a character who upsets many moral norms of the 80s, going after people that are performing a lot more culturally acceptable deeds. It's just a very interesting film. The series as a whole, of course, plays up the ideas of her sexual guilt, of her gender identity crisis, of her feelings of confusion brought on her by her mother. It's just strange. So, the number one reason, of course, to watch these movies is Angela. She's just a blast to watch. Anyway, but that's what I like most about the Sleepaway Camp movies. I really, really enjoy them. If you haven't seen them, I know the first one streams on Shudder. You can pick up the second and third for a pretty reasonable price on iTunes. I don't think you can buy them on Vudu just yet. And I believe Scream Factory put out a pretty good Blue. Let me confirm that before I send everyone looking. Yeah, Shout Factory put out a Sleepaway Camp Blu-ray that's pretty awesome. So definitely check that out. And I believe Sleepaway Camp 2, Sleepaway Camp 2 was also put out by Shout Factory as well. So yeah, just go ahead and check out the franchise, guys. Let me know in the group. I'd love to carry on this discussion. What do you think about the Sleepaway Camp series as a whole, and what do you like most about it? And also, what's your favorite horror slasher ripoff of Friday the 13th? I'd love to hear. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I'm so happy to do another installment of the Summer of Fear series. I'm actually going to be wrapping up this series in next Wednesday's episode of Gut Reactions. I'm going to be talking about the summer horror movie to end all summer horror movies. I'll give you a hint. It takes place on the 4th of July weekend. So if you know what movie that is, you should be very, very excited for what's to come. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Be sure to leave a 5-star review on iTunes if you enjoy the show, and to get involved in the Facebook group Gut Reactions, the horror discussion group there. Follow on Instagram and Twitter, and keep the conversation going, and let's all celebrate horror together. Thanks again for listening. My name is Eric Straczynski, and this is Gut Reactions.